With just 10 legislative days left to prevent a government shutdown, House Democrats now looking to their Senate counterparts to stop any GOP spending bill, excluding their input. But distrust between the party is growing after the March funding bill cleared with support from Senate Democrats, including Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. This month, Democrats fear the same outcome. Now, Schumer writing this to Democrats after speaking with Hakeem Jeffries, quote, "We are aligned on our shared priorities for September. Where Republicans obstruct, we press forward. Where they sow division, we answer with unity. Where they threaten shutdown, we hold them accountable." I want to bring in Ohio Congressman Warren Davidson. He's a member of the House Financial Services Committee. Congressman, and one of the things that the Hill is reporting this morning is that the reminder about March, and that it was Chuck Schumer that lined up with the GOP to get the funding passed. But Democrats seem to believe right now that Schumer is not going to make that same mistake. However, that could be political suicide for the midterms for the Democrats. Your reaction?
Yeah, good morning, Cheryl. I think that's the real challenge. Chuck Schumer has always said it's irresponsible to shut down the government. And, he felt convicted about that and frankly supplied the votes in the Senate to keep us from having a shutdown, which is what Democrats wanted. They wanted the shutdown. And they seem to be pressuring Chuck Schumer to give them another shutdown. Usually that doesn't turn out well for the party that shuts down the government. But the real challenge is, no surprise, Congress isn't going to hit the September 30th funding deadline. And part of the challenge has been the Senate because Democrats have been obstructing President Trump's nominees. So they've used up all the floor time. They can't get to the floor to do some of the appropriations.
Well, and it looks like they're really...
question is, what are we going to do?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it looks like they're really going to dig in on the Affordable Care Act, and that's where they're going to start to maybe put down some red lines. So we'll see what they do when things get back going today. But I want to bring in Liz Peek. She's got a question for you, sir.
Yeah, I'm just curious what it is that's really on the table here. I mean, obviously Republicans are going to be trying to cut or hold spending, and I presume that Democrats don't like that. Is it all about the cuts in the big, beautiful bill to Medicaid? Is that what they're going to try to reverse? In your view, what is the big sticking point to arriving at some sort of agreement?
Well, in March, we couldn't develop a consensus beyond just status quo funding, CR. And it's hard for Democrats to say they oppose that because they passed it. I mean, This is what really the Democrats wanted when Joe Biden was president and they had the majority in the Senate. So it's hard for them to come out against that funding level. So a lot of people see just a status quo CR as the most conservative thing we could pass, because to get 60 votes in the Senate, requires some major concession to Democrats. There are some provisions within Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, that expire, and they want to reauthorize those to continue expanding Obamacare. And obviously that approach to healthcare didn't work. Premiums have skyrocketed. People have been as frustrated as ever on healthcare. So why wouldn't we consider changing course on the Affordable Care Act?
Well, several of your colleagues have come onto the program and said they believe that likely we're going to have a CR. Is that what you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's usually how it plays out. I mean, what I would like to see is a CR in order to do what, though? And my hope is that we do really fund Republican priorities, campaign promises. There are things that we want to fund at a higher level. There are things we want to completely defund and things we simply want to fund at a lower level. The other thing is there are policy riders that are attached to all these kinds of things. And if we don't really pass real appropriations, we don't get our policy riders. So, that's part of what you're supposed to do when you're in the majority. Is play offense, win on offense. And I think it's frustrating for a lot of the momentum to be, well, let's just bring out the punter and do a CR.
Right, especially when you want to see meaningful cuts that are lasting. And that's what, the American people voted for last November. I want to ask you about this. There's this new bipartisan bill which seeks to curb lawmaker stock trading. It allows members to reinvest holdings tax-free, but it would allow lawmakers to defer capital gains taxes by reinvesting stock sale proceeds into mutual funds, or they could put them into U.S. Treasuries, Congressman. Capital Trades, that's a platform tracking market moves by elected officials, is reporting that 120 members of Congress made more than 9,400 trades last year alone. Where do you sit on this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think ethics covers a lot of this right now. We have disclosures so people can do that. There are, sites that have come up to help track what members trade, and it's disclosed publicly. One of the urban legends is members of Congress are exempt from insider trading laws. They're not. Chris Collins was put in jail for insider trading while I was in Congress. So that's an urban legend. But I've chosen not to buy individual shares since the early days I was in. I had sold some shares that I owned and repurchased some on an individual share basis.
Right.
And kind of since then, I've just said, I'm not buying individual shares. I've done a lot in the crypto space. I've been telling people Bitcoin makes a lot of sense since I've been in Congress, and Bitcoin was like $500. So I avoided buying it because as a financial services leader on this subject, the perception would be bad. I don't have any inside information, but I certainly would have I've given away a very large upside by making those choices.
Yeah, you certainly did. Unfortunately, I'm so sorry to hear that because Bitcoin has been over 100,000 now. President Trump did confirm European leaders are expected in the U.S. this week. Russia did launch the largest attack on Ukraine since the beginning of the war, killing at least 4. Here is the president yesterday.
I'm not happy about the whole situation. It's interesting. It doesn't affect us because it's not our soldiers. But they're losing now. I used to tell you 5,000. They're losing 7,000 between Ukraine and Russia, 7,000 soldiers every single week. It's such a horrible waste of humanity. So, no, I am not thrilled with what's happening there. Certain European leaders are coming over to our country on Monday or Tuesday, and individually. And I think we're going to get that settled.
When do you plan to speak to President Putin next? And what
Very
might
soon,
second
over the next couple of days.
So the president's signaling readiness to move to a second phase of sanctions on Russia. As peace talks to end the war obviously remain stalled, Congressman, where do you think we are?
Well, look, Secretary Bessent highlighted that he would like to see sanctions, or they're prepared to put secondary sanctions to really close off some of these things. Some of these sanctions have been in place. They're just not heavily enforced. So that's part of what brought Putin to the table is tariffs on India, and India is a big outlet for Russian trade in energy. I think, President Trump knows all these tools. The question is, will Europeans enforce it? So the dialogue has been, the United States will do sanctions, but a lot of the Europeans end up not doing the same sanctions that they want the United States to do. So the tools are in the kit bag. The question is, are we going to use them? But I do think at some point Russia's calculation is, if all we have is sticks, where's the upside for Russia? I mean, they feel like they've already committed significant lives and they can just take what they need militarily, as long as no one else adds troops to the mix to support Ukraine, because Ukraine is fundamentally running out of manpower. And I think that's the real challenge here. What forces a negotiation? And, Sun Tzu famously said, build a golden bridge. Where's the bridge? And I think that's the real question Putin and the Russians are asking. And I'm not saying, hey, that's what we have to do. That's for Ukraine to decide. And I think President Trump's rightly saying, what a waste of humanity. He wants people to stop dying. And I applaud him for that. I hope he spends more time talking to J.D. Vance than Lindsey Graham in the next few days, though.
Oh, interesting. Well, I mean, obviously it is, you're right. I mean, the president has talked about how horrific the death toll is in this war. Before you go, I want to ask you about this. A New York Times report detailing a failed operation by SEAL Team 6's Red Squadron. This was under the first Trump term, aimed at planting a device in North Korea that was meant to intercept Kim Jong-un's communications while the leaders discussed nuclear talks. Congressman, it's a very lengthy piece, but it says that the mission failed, and that the North Koreans were aware that this mission had happened. And that's one of the reasons that at the time that the nuclear talks stalled. And then next thing you know, North Korea is building more nuclear weapons. Your reaction to that threat from them?
Well, the New York Times reported this. I read the article. Look, at some level, that's responsible journalism. At another level, the intent is really just to undermine President Trump's effectiveness. But it does highlight that the oversight and accountability for the intelligence apparatus of our country has been deficient, because this is something that, according to the New York Times, wasn't disclosed to Congress, that wasn't really following proper protocol. And we put boundaries in place. Nothing is supposed to be so classified that the Speaker of the House, the Leader of the Senate, the Chairman of Senate Intel, House Intel can't be read in on it. That's not our system of government. And frankly, we've got things that are considered so classified, they don't even want to tell President Trump. That's why we have Tulsi Gabbard as DNI, and I hope those kind of reforms that she's working on take hold.
Congressman Warren Davidson, it's always great to have you on the program. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right.